My father went to go do something very normal. My mother was hungry. My father went to go get her some food. And as he was going through a green light, somebody ran a red light and took his life. So 1 minute the father's there, the next minute he's not. Was devastating. And it took us so many years to rebound. I think part of it was, David, I did not have the tools.
So today here on CIA Contagious Influencers of America, we have our dear friend, Tim Storey.
He's been a real good buddy to you.
He is the ultimate comeback coach. He actually contributed to saving my life earlier this year.
He did.
When I was going through some things and bleeding.
Going through some, you were hemorrhaging.
Yeah. He helped hook me up with a great therapist who helped me get through that. Took about a month. Then I come back here to Nashville, and then all of a sudden I go through COVID-19. So isn't that just wonderful? It's been a heck of a year, right?
It has been.
But you know what? If you're going to go through it all at once.
Yeah. If you're going to go through hell, just don't stay there. There's a country song. So maybe we've been going through hell the last 6 months. Just don't stay there.
How does that go? If you're going through hell?
If you're going through hell. If you're going through hell, something.
If you're going through hell, just keep going. Just keep
don't
moving.
Stay or something.
Whatever.
I don't listen to country, but I know there's a song about. Anyways, bottom line is, it's not a sin to get knocked down. Just don't stay down.
Tim Storey is someone who has really helped a lot of folks. From Robert Downey Jr., he helped get Robert Downey Jr. out of his, remember when he was hooked on drugs?
He was. And I mean, he is a different guy.
Yeah.
And Tim Storey is credited with helping him become the man he is today.
He's been a life coach to the stars, everybody from the Smokey Robinsons of the world to Quincy Jones, you name it. Tim Storey has worked with him. So I felt really...
And now David Sams.
Look, when I went out to California in January, you know what I was going through.
I do.
And I landed and I was literally, I knew I had to get out of Dodge, meaning a couple thousand miles away. And I got out there, literally, from the moment I got off the plane, I went to see Tim.
Yeah, he did help you put your pieces back together.
Oh, yeah.
There's no doubt.
Oh, yeah. And I met up with this incredible therapist. And I would suggest that you all do the same if you're going through. First of all, we're all going through craziness right now. We're all trying to recover.
Listen, we're either in a valley, coming out of a valley, or on our way into one.
That's right. That's right. And so if you're going through something right now, I would highly recommend that you find some help, especially those who have lost so much over the past few months, whether it be a loved one, whether it be a job, whether it be an opportunity, whether it be a lot of people haven't paid their mortgage in 3, 4, 5, 6 months now, or the rent.
And I'm sure there are some families who are fractured.
People
with
are losing
all of
their
this.
car.
I mean, let's be serious. Some people, they can be around their family members for holidays, but now some people have had to stay together 24/7. These parents who are having to homeschool their kids, all kinds of things that everybody's going through. This is the podcast you want to listen to. Let Tim Storey encourage you.
So Tim is known for being the comeback coach. And I could not think of anybody better than to bring onto the podcast than my dear friend, Tim Storey.
Here it is.
So, Tim, here's the way I look at it. You know, things were just rolling along. We were living this great life come January, February, some of us more than others. But, hey, we had all these big ideas for 2020. You know, we were going to have this was going to be the year of the vision, the visionary, right? Going to take over the world. And then all of a sudden, here we are in March. We go to bed one night. We put our toolbox right next to our bed. It's full of all these wonderful tools that we have to use. We wake up the next morning. Bam! All of our tools have been stolen from us. Every one of them. Our hammer, our saw, all of our tools. Somebody by the name of Corona stole all of our tools. All right? So I want you to help me. I want you to help our listeners here. We got to get our tools back.
We do.
And we can't wait years to do it. But some of us have been robbed of our jobs. Some of us have been robbed of our opportunities. Some of us have been robbed of relationships that we had that now, we can't even get on a plane. And if we do, it's like we're scared to death. So help me out here. How do we get back, for example, how do we get back our hammer?
Well, I think that in the time that we live in, both of us are old enough to remember things like the Vietnam War, some of the riots that took place in the 60s, so many things that we would call life interruptions. But as you're saying, we've never faced anything like this where it's hit every part of the planet at the same time. There's a scripture in Proverbs. I love the Message Bible, the way it says it. It says, unrelenting disappointment can leave you heartsick, but a sudden good break can turn your life around. So what you have stated is that disappointment is happening in every area of people's lives. It's happening in their jobs, financially, with their families, with their social life, with their physical life many times, and even with their mental mindset. So this is a time where we really need answers. So thank you for allowing me to give some that I think would help people. So it says, unrelenting disappointment can leave you heartsick, but a sudden good break can turn your life around. I think just as COVID-19 hit suddenly, which means something done quickly, unexpectedly, without warning, we have to have faith that God could move suddenly. He can move quickly. He can move without warning. And just as negative things have come into your life, that positive things can come into your life. Now, when somebody is disappointed, and rightfully so, they go inward, because disappointment means something did not work. So that disappointment turns you inward. And so there's a lot of people, you're listening right now, and your head is bowed. Your countenance is down. But what we need to start doing is believing and beholding again. Those are two words that are so important to all of us. We need to believe that somehow, some way, that God can help us through. And we need to behold, which is to look up and pay attention. Because a sudden good break can turn your life around. The word break means an opportunity and a chance. The word turn means to reverse position. It means a turn of events. And am I an optimistic person? Yes. I do believe that in the midst of the challenges that we're facing, that some of us needed the reset. We wish it didn't happen this way. Some of us needed to be restored. We wish it didn't happen this way. But now that we're here, what can we learn and how can we respond?
The way I look at it, God gave us a big time out because we were really being kind of nasty, kind of bad. And,
yes.
I know this has been a great time for me because number one, I've been in isolation. Number two, and that's sometimes good. You can't get in so much trouble. The other thing is that, oh my gosh, I've discovered something amazing, and I really do mean this. Because by about the second week of this, I started going outside and walking, and I started at 3 miles a day, and now I'm up to as much as 7, 8, 9 miles a day while walking. Boy, I tell you, it puts me in touch with nature. It puts me in touch with God. It puts me in touch with amazing podcasts. I'm making phone calls and talking to people that I never really made that much time for before. I'm getting my priorities straight. And the other thing is that I've discovered the wonderful thing about coming home and having that alone time by yourself.
Yes. I'm very impressed with the fact that you're walking that far. Number one, that's not easy for all you listeners who've ever tried to walk that far.
Oh my! I've already
But
gone through a pair of my Nike, my really good shoes. I've already gone through one pair.
yes, but I think that you would agree with this, that this whole idea that unrelenting disappointment can leave you heartsick, right? We've all been there in our lives of we're disappointed. And I'm seeing this as I travel and talk to people in the past. But, now that we're all quarantined, I see it escalating. The disappointment of if they didn't lose their job, they know somebody that did.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And now what do we do with that disappointment? In my opinion, we can't just sit and settle in it. So that's why I brought up those 2 points, that we need to still believe and we need to still behold. When you think about believing, how would you see that idea about still believing?
Well, first of all, I can relate. The first thing happened on the radio side of things with our radio show, Keep the Faith, is that we literally walked in and lost 40% of our advertising revenue. Now, that hurts, and there's no doubt in a lot of our stations that we work with, they deal with the donors. And even though some of the donor programs have not gone way down, the fact is that most of those donors, whether it's Christian radio or whether it's public radio, those are pledges. That's not necessarily money in the bank.
Right.
Those are people who are saying, "Hey, I'll send in my donation over the next 12 months for X dollars." Well, it's great to think that way, but we also know now that there's tens of millions of people out of work who can't afford to make that pledge work. So, we've had to rethink things, and we've had to it's one thing just to cut budgets. I mean, yeah, we can all do that. But by golly, this is a time to think out of the box, to innovate, to come up with new ways of doing things. I applaud the guy the CEO of Twitter, who says, "Hey, you know what? I don't think we need offices anymore. You guys can work from home if you want." I mean,
Yes.
That is an amazing opportunity. You know why? That also means, for example, if you live in California, you're going to get an extra 2 or 3 hours a day at home with your family because you're not going to be commuting.
Yes.
A ripple effect of opportunity is created here.
Yes. So being that I think like a life coach, I got to give you some steps. Is that okay?
Absolutely. That's what I'm calling you for.
So one of the things you just talked about is that we need to reposition ourselves. So I totally agree with this. So we need to reposition ourselves and reset ourselves. And some of you may work from home for a long time. Some people may not go back to the same job ever. But the reality of this is that, as we've been taught before, God will sometimes close a door to open up the door. And I know it hurts. I mean, it hurts because I'm life coaching many, many people every single day through Zoom or Skype, and it hurts. But I believe personally that some people needed to be repositioned. The second thing is that we have to.
And Tim, can I say something to that?
Oh, yeah.
There's a reason that, mama birds have to push the baby birds out of the nest. That's the only way they'll ever learn to fly.
Yes.
So a lot of us have been stuck inside of our nest for years and years and years. We think about that big dream. We think about that big idea. I tell all of my friends now who have been telling me for years that they got a book in them, they want to write a book. If we come out of this and I don't have 40 books coming at me from people who go, "Man, I wrote that book over that 2 or 3 months," right? I never want to hear about how they want to write a book again if they only have the time.
Totally agree. I totally agree. I'll tell you a story that you may or may not know. Remember the great basketball player Tim Duncan, who played for the San Antonio Spurs?
No, I don't remember.
He's over about 7'1", and Tim Duncan was a great player in the NBA. He's now retired, but he was from one of the islands, one of the islands out there in the Caribbean. And he wanted to be a swimmer. He wanted to be a swimmer. but there was a challenge. When he was in about the 7th grade, they closed down the local swimming pool. And so he could no longer be a swimmer. So he picked up a basketball and he became a basketball player and became an NBA All-Star and made a load of money. And his mother was quoted as saying, "I'm glad they closed the swimming pool." Sometimes they got to close the swimming pool.
Right. We had to be pushed out of our comfort zones. And first of all, we've been in a stinking thinking zone for a number of years.
Wow. Yep.
You know, we've all been, I mean, it's been this tug of war. As a matter of fact, I was just having a conversation today with somebody here. I was saying, do you realize, I think 50% of what we're going through right now is all the nonsense we're getting from the media. Because do you realize, Tim, if we could rewind the world by 25 years, we would not have the internet that we have. We wouldn't have any social media. We wouldn't have any Zoom. We would not have battling cable TV news networks, okay, back then.
Right.
You know, we would have people that basically presented the news. There was not all this opinion. There was not all this us versus you. You know, we would have had an evening newspaper, and we would have had the CBS or NBC or ABC evening news at 6 o'clock or 6:30, right?
So true.
If we would have been in the same situation, we wouldn't have all these crazy people and all these conspiracy theories every day on social media. And I think that we would actually kind of just push through this without all the craziness.
Yes, I think that is so true. And so life is changing our position. But at the same time, after you have the change of position, that you have to practice that word called patience. And I think that this is where a lot of our friends are getting in trouble, is that they want things to go back to normal. And why don't you address that for a minute? Because I think normal has changed, don't you think?
Normal has totally changed. You know, there's goods and bads, because if we didn't have the internet and we didn't have Zoom, you know, we think we've been bored for the last 2 months. Can you imagine what it would be like not have like you know, look at all the creativity that you and your folks have had over the last 2 months. I mean, you've created this new Sunday night thing on where was it? Facebook?
Yeah, so we're doing a Facebook Live, and our average audience is about 110,000 people. And, you know, because I know you love the Ohio State Buckeyes. How many people does that stadium hold?
100,000, give or take.
Okay.
Well, more give.
That's a lot of people, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's exciting for me.
So you've created your own little network, your own little show yourself, and I know others have done it too, because you know you don't have a gatekeeper now.
You don't have a gatekeeper, and so I could have just sat there in my setback, but I decided to use the opportunity to learn, to grow, to reset myself, to heal myself. A lot of people are getting chubbier. I've lost weight in this situation. Are you losing weight or gaining weight? I don't know.
No, you know what? I've actually put on about only about 5-6 pounds, which I could take off in a couple of days. But with all the walking I'm doing, and I'm also doing some weights, so some of it may be muscle. I will tell you, the thing that you're doing with all the world changers, I've seen some of our friends on there over the last few weeks rattle off some of the people who are sitting around their homes and they get a call from Tim Storey saying, "Hey, come on my show on Facebook." They just show up on Sunday night.
I'll give you a few. I'll give you Randy Jackson, who was formerly of American Idol.
Mm-hmm.
People remember him. He was on there for about 12 years. How about Ricky Lake? When was the last time we had Ricky Lake?
I always loved her.
I mean, she did that show so well. And of course, you understand talk shows. Then Sherry Shepherd, who was on The View for a long time.
Yeah, I love her. She's a strong believer.
Strong believer, doing a lot of other projects. And then amazing people like Lewis Howes. He's got one of the top podcasts right now in America.
I saw Devon Franklin, I think, last week. Devon and his wife, right?
Fine. Devon and Megan Good were on last week. And then coming up Ianla Van Zant has already said yes to do it. And hopefully we'll get a guy named David Sams on there as well.
Just let me know. So people can watch this on, how do they find out, or how do they go to it on Sunday nights?
Yeah, they just go to Facebook, and then it's Tim Storey, Storey official. So Tim Storey, Storey official, Sunday nights, and it's 6 p.m. Pacific time. 6 p.m. Pacific time.
So 9 Eastern in the old network way of saying that, 9 Eastern, 8 Central, 6 Pacific time. You can watch Tim Storey and all of these world changers that you're booking on how to turn 2020 into the year that we thought it could be. It still can be.
Yeah, it sure can be, but it's going to take patience. It's going to take patience. You got to look at your life, and you got to think that, truly, as you've heard this so many times, life is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And you've heard that over and over, haven't you, David Sams?
Oh, many times, yes.
Okay, so this is the truth. We've got to be patient with the process, and that don't expect things to go back to exactly the way they used to be. Things have shifted, but God is with you. He is bigger than the shift.
Let's talk about loss for a minute, because getting back to the toolbox analogy, some people have lost loved ones. And I know that you went through this with your dad. And
Yes.
I'd love for you to tell that story again, because one minute you got dad, next minute you don't. And I'd like for you to tell that, because I think a lot of people have just gone through that with a loved one, where one minute they're there, one minute they're not. And then tell me how you work through that grieving process, how it was for you.
Yeah. So, for all of us that have lost somebody, we know that it makes such an impact on our lives. And the more I've studied on grief, the average person grieves for at least 2 years. And the grief is an internal groaning. But grief is not always negative, because part of grief is a display of how much we really loved and cared for someone. But for me, David, I was only 10 years of age, and it was an amazing thing, because my father went to go do something very normal. My mother was hungry. My father went to go get her some food at a restaurant that they both liked. He went to go pick up the food after they had called it in. And as he was going through a green light, somebody ran a red light and took his life. And so, we have 5 children. So one minute the father's there, the next minute he's not. And so my mother, who has a 6th grade education, worked at a donut shop, and she didn't even drive. Wasn't even a driver. That's how much my father was the leader. She didn't even have her license. And so to go from that feeling where the father is guiding you, guarding you, and governing you, to then he's gone, was devastating. And it took us so many years to rebound. And I think part of it was, David, I did not have the tools. We did not have the tools. And that's why I'm so excited about this program, is because we're helping to give people the tools to rise up from their setback.
So obviously it took a lot from you to get from that point and work through the healing process and go through the grieving. Tell me what that was like, what you had to work through in order to get to the other side.
Well, one of the things about grieving is that you're gonna feel things you never felt before, and some of you can identify with this. And you possibly might hear things you never heard before. And the things you might hear is negative communication. But the thing that I heard was my mother crying from the next room. I'd never, ever in my life heard my mother cry once. And then I would hear her cry as quiet as she could. I don't think she knew we were hearing her. I was hearing her cry on a nightly basis, and that was the worst feeling, because not only was the father gone, now my mother, who is now the head of the house, was not in a good state. And so the feelings that I felt, the sounds that I heard really left me paralyzed. But I think that that's where the power of partnership comes in. And in this case, we were part of a very good church with an amazing pastor who used to do something that they did a long time ago called home visitations. And David, our pastor, literally used to show up to our house. And
I remember,
with my family.
Don't forget, I'm a preacher's kid. So I remember back in the 60s and 70s, my dad would go, he called it calling.
This
I'm going
exactly
calling.
What happened.
And of course, now if you do that, you'd probably get shot, but back in those days, and people invited you in your house and gave you a piece of pie,
Exactly. And so it was a long time ago. And the pastor used to come by to the Storey family, and he had dialogue with my mom and dialogue with my older sisters and my brother. And I will tell you that the power of partnership is healing. And that's why in the midst of this isolation, we have to make sure that we do not stay isolated. And why don't you speak to that? Because you've been in quarantine too. But it's important that we still talk to people on the phone, or get in group meetings or Zoom meetings or Skype meetings. Tell them why it's so important that we don't isolate in the midst of isolation.
The one thing that I have come to realize, I've lived in my home, I've lived in my community for going on 6 years now here in Middle Tennessee. And the one thing I've noticed over those many years is there are all these beautiful homes in the neighborhood, but you never see anybody outside. You never see anybody sitting on these beautiful front porches. And since this has happened, I've seen more people sitting on their front porches who actually wave at me when I am doing my walking. How you doing? And I wave back.
Amazing.
And I am just astonished at the number of people who are walking around in the community with their little kids, and some of them are on little bikes with their training wheels. And the other day I saw, and I've seen this now 3 times over the last couple of weeks. Remember when we were kids, we would play ball in the street?
Oh, of course.
I haven't seen that in decades. I am now in a cul-de-sac, I am now seeing kids playing ball in the street again. And the other day I saw a dad playing the pitcher, and the other kids have they have their little bases in the cul-de-sac. I went around the block and I saw a dad playing t-ball with, it must have been his 7 or 8 year old daughter and probably a 5-year-old daughter. This is like America 1970. I don't recognize this America. So as much of all this terrible stuff that we see on TV, it's like a horror show if you turn on the news. I see all these wonderful things happening around my neighborhood.
Yeah, it is a reset and a readjustment, as we talked about earlier. And I'm so glad that people in the midst of pain and death are rediscovering life. So isn't that an amazing thing? Did you hear what I just said? In the midst of pain and death, they're rediscovering life.
Yeah, we are. Now I will tell you, I live in Middle Tennessee. We're a little bit more progressive. I didn't think I'd ever use that word for Middle Tennessee. And look, you're all locked up there in Southern California. It's crazy.
Exactly. Exactly.
Tim, I actually, right before I signed on with you, guess where I was? I got a haircut.
How'd that feel?
I went to the beauty salon. Not that I'm beautiful, but I went to the salon, and I got a haircut, and I'm like, man, this is like awesome. And I put it up on Facebook, and oh my gosh, I had all my Southern California friends go, oh my gosh, if only we could get our hair cut.
Number one, to the listening audience, he's still beautiful. But it is a new day, and I do believe that we've got to push on, press on. When my father passed, at that point, David, we seemed like we were going to be paralyzed in that pain. I've now gone on to speak to 75 countries of the world and share that story all over the world, written 2 books on turning your setbacks to comebacks, and get to work with you on projects, turning setbacks to comebacks. And so in that case, really, I turned my test into my testimony. And the testimony, as you know, is not just always verbal. It is in how you walk and how you move and even how you respond. So that's so important that we respond.
So what is the key? What is the key for somebody listening right now? What is the key to turning their setback into a comeback?
I got it right here. So a comeback from a spiritual standpoint, from a biblical standpoint, is 3 things. Number 1, it's God breathed. You need to let the Creator breathe back into your soul. And when we spent time in Southern California, in that beautiful place by the ocean, did you not feel the breath of God?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was totally renewed there. And for those of you listening, I went through a very dark period. I mean, very dark. I was in California. I met up with my good buddy Tim here. You put me with a therapist.
Yeah.
Because you said, man, you need to, we need to get you with somebody to stop the bleeding. I remember you saying that.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And you put me with somebody who, you sent me to the emotional ER.
Yeah.
Man, she's a specialist in getting the bleeding to stop. Because you can't heal until you get the wound closed. And you're going to have a scar, but daggone it, between the 2 of you, I got through it. It took me a month. I got to be out there amongst all those palm trees and the ocean for a month, and got a lot of loving. So I so appreciate that.
I see the light coming back to you in such an amazing way. And this is good for everybody that's listening, because listen, if you're not going through it in the area of just the direct result of COVID-19, you're going through it in other forms of disappointment or breakups or other illnesses. You know, there's other illnesses going on out there, guys, besides COVID-19. But when you came to Southern California and we spent a lot of time together, part of it was also the environment that you were in. You know, you were located by this beautiful thing called the Pacific Ocean. And so a comeback, what I call a God idea comeback, is number 1, God breathed, where he breathes life back into your soul. The second is it's God inspired. God inspired. And what you were talking about, that in the midst of the isolation and quarantine, if we'll let ourselves, God will inspire us in the privacy of our own home. Isn't that true?
That's very true. Absolutely. It doesn't take a whole lot. It does not take a whole lot.
No, I'm inspired. I'm God inspired. And that's why, you know, I'm working on a new book that you helped with the connection. I want you to know that. I have a new book coming out with HarperCollins, and David Sams, who's such a great friend. I mean, you're always looking out for all of us. I have a new book coming out. We did that new Sunday show on Facebook that you're talking about. But I'm doing a lot of things that I probably would not have had the time to complete or do effectively had I not had this setback. So a God idea comeback is God breathed, God inspired, and God endorsed. If God be for you, who could be against you? That's my answer.
That's good stuff, my friend. Hey, listen, I'm going to let you go because I know you got a coaching session coming up here in a few minutes.
I do.
Share with the folks how they can find you. And if somebody wants to have a coaching session with you,
Yes.
one-on-one, and I know that you're very giving. You do all these wonderful things online. You don't charge for like the Sunday night thing. That's out of the kindness, goodness of your heart. But if somebody needs that one-on-one attention a few times, how does that happen?
I think the best way to get a hold of us is just go to Instagram. Instagram is such a powerful force now. If you just go to Tim Storey Official, then again, that's STOREY. I have an E in my story. So Tim, STOREY, Tim Storey Official, and then just direct message us. Or you can go to our website, timstorey.com. We're doing that, David, one-on-one coaching. Also, we have something called the World Shakers Network that we talk to people every Monday night. I'm on every Monday night, 6 p.m. Pacific. I like the way you said that. 8 o'clock Central Time and 9 o'clock on the Eastern side. Every Monday night, I talk to people on something called World Shakers Network, and you can learn more about that. And that's about stirring up the dream that's inside of you.
Well, my friend, thank you much. I'm going to be talking with you offline here in the next couple of days. I know we have some other things to share, but
I look forward to it.
I so appreciate you. I love you, and you just keep up the good work, and you be safe out there, okay?
Thank you, my friend.
So if you want to learn more about Tim Storey, go to timstorey.com. That's STOREY. I guess his dad didn't know how to spell.
I'm sure he would not appreciate that.
Well, his dad's no longer with us, which Tim talked about, but he was such an influence on Tim's life as his mom has been. And I'll tell you.
And it's evident.
And it's so evident. Mm-hmm. He is such a leader. The guy has spoken all over the world in 75, 80 countries.
Wow.
Every time I see him, it's in between these online coaching sessions that he does. He coaches people online, one by, individually, all over the world. So I'm like, Tim, can I get an hour here or get a half hour there? And it's like he'll be coaching the president of some country. Then he puts me in there, and then he goes and now he's coaching some star.
Right.
In the next
Which
hour.
says a lot about him. I mean, think about it. And I'm sure he coaches some people who many people have never heard of. So it just says a lot about Tim is not prejudiced against who he wants to help.
No. He is in high demand, but he coaches folks from all walks of life. You can check it out at timstorey.com. And also make sure that you check out his Sunday night session that he has on Zoom and Facebook and all that. You can find out more about that on his website at timstorey.com. I'm David Sams.
And I'm Victoria Robinson.
You've been listening to CIA, Contagious Influencers of America, the podcast from the producers of Keep the Faith.
Make sure that you rate us and give us a comment. It helps us to get the word out and make sure other people get to listen too.
And go out there and live that life in living color, because it sure is a heck of a lot more interesting than living it in black and white. We'll see you next time.